J'ai besoin de ça. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for making it out of bed so early. I know I was struggling with it, so happy to have you here. I'll talk about privacy, and I want to talk about why it matters a little bit, and also like what you can do to make sure you build with privacy. I'm going to highlight some of the things we do at Centrifuge, and I think why it's important to like sort of start thinking about that. And if we have time in the end for a few discussion about it, sharing ideas, I think that would be a wonderful idea to do. A little bit about myself. I'm the co-founder at Centrifuge. I focus mostly on our protocol, on our tech. I've always been working on different web products. Like basically since I left high school, I was building something that was connecting people, businesses in one way or another. What is Centrifuge? Centrifuge is a young project, small. We're in Berlin. About 1.5 years ago, we started looking into how to build a decentralized protocol that helps connect businesses and sort of settle their transactions. We work on bringing companies together in a way that doesn't require any intermediaries, any trusted third parties, but that they can transact peer-to-peer. So we're building a product for Ethereum. It is completely open source, free for anyone to join, and nothing that we control. But the problem for us is once you start talking about real-world transactions for a company, if you're going to tell them that everything that they do is going to be open on a public ledger, that means that your competitors can see what your profit margin is. Your customer will see that too, and they'll say, "Hey, like, I'm going to pay not a cent more than what your margin is because I know I can negotiate down to that." You have your competitors look at where you buy your goods, what you do, and sort of try to copy you, for example. Right? There's all these problems that we somehow need to solve. So this is where I'm coming from, or what I do with privacy in my job. But it's also, I think, just something in general. Like as technologists, we should think of the impact that we have building these things and making sure that we build technology that works towards privacy, towards freedom in the society, that easily gets lost in the interests of corporates and individual projects. So I'll just try very briefly to summarize Centrifuge because I'll talk a little bit about some of the concepts, but I don't want to spend too much time on it. Centrifuge itself is, I said it's a protocol. What we actually do is we define a way that companies can, for example, settle an order, purchase goods. So if you think of just buying something as an individual, it's you go to a store, you hand the person $1 and you get your Coke. As a company, you have a purchase order, you have to settle on a price, you're going to ask for a quote, you're going to approve it internally, you're going to ask for a delivery receipt, you're going to get an invoice, you're going to pay that invoice, and then you're done. So back and forth, back and forth. We're building processes to do this in a decentralized way. I mentioned on-chain. We use libp2p to do the sort of the heavy lifting, like all of the off-chain communication, and then in Ethereum for sort of our network security as this immutable ledger that we need. But going to back to privacy, the definition of privacy is the state or condition of being free from being observed or disturbed by other people. So if I translate that to what we do, I think it translates to if you build a product that enables privacy, or if you want to give users privacy, you build a product that requires the least amount of information necessary from the user to achieve the user's goal, and you give the user control, as much control as possible over who they want to share this data with as possible. So Matt Green, one of the inventors of Zcash, actually came up with this. I think it's a great analogy, right? Like Bitcoin is like Twitter for your bank account, and of course he's making his case for privacy-enabled transaction. So Zcash, but if we apply this to the Ethereum world, is Ethereum Twitter for everything else, right? Like everything you do in the world, every single thing is public. Let's hope we don't end up building this world. I could rant about why privacy matters. Give you the examples, like talk about, oh, like why privacy? I've got nothing to hide, etc., etc. I'm gonna skip. I just want to give like 3 like small stories to make this a little bit more colorful. I have 3 personas. Let's start with Joe. Joe uses his Coinbase funds, to fund his Ethereum wallet. He buys crypto collectibles, kitties, whatever. He participates in some content creation and social network that is using some of his Ethereum funds to tip people. He's a bit of a political activist. He's maybe pro-unionizing or like doesn't agree with his employer on some of the things that his employer does. Voices these things publicly. Unfortunately for him, well, he does so publicly, but thinking he's doing this privately. But well, at some point, Coinbase gets hacked, their account database gets leaked, and this Ethereum address that he was using that he thought was private and not really linked to his identity is now forever linked. And the same way that your employer can now look at everything you post on Facebook, well, with all of these interactions on Ethereum, he's going to have a much harder time looking for a job with something like that out in the open. Another different example, and these are just made up examples, but I think very sort of show what can happen. Let's talk about Carla. She splurges on a 5-star hotel room because she's been working really hard and wanted to treat herself with something. And like this once, she said, "Okay, well, this is an amazing place. I'm gonna splurge on this luxury." Problem is, she did this on booking on DAP Hotel or whatever, decentralizedbooking.com, but she hasn't booked her flight yet. So now when she goes back to this site, or she goes to an airline company and tries to book the flight, the airline company sees, well, she just paid $400 a night for a hotel room. There's no reason why I would offer her a flight for $100 if I know that she can probably afford a flight for $300. So now, because she made this transaction in the public, the airline company is going to charge them. And this is, especially with airlines, actually, like if you look at their pricing, it's one of the least transparent ones, and they're trying to do this already as much as possible, right? Like you pay $100 today, you pay $500 tomorrow. Like think of the information you get if you have just everything out in the open. Like this is not really something you want. Like another thing, like if you think of health insurance, right? If you would buy your health insurance on a public marketplace that is a peer-to-peer insurance, and then suddenly you have to go to an oncologist, for treating you for cancer. Well, like if you pay that doctor with your same Ethereum wallets that you pay your insurance, the insurance company, even if they don't know anything about the doctor or about this health issue, they might start to try to deny you service or like hike up your prices or whatever, right? So all of these things, if we build these systems in a way that we enable this, we're going to end up with people wanting to do it because it's clearly in the interest of the individual actors to optimize for this, right? So I want to quote this. It's a wall of text, but I had to put it on a slide so I can read it out loud for you. This is a section of a paper that was published by Jerry Brito. I think it captures it captures the privacy topic quite well. Their Coin Center is, I guess, a think tank or whatever, and the audience is legislators, politicians, etc. So in a world without cash, a bearer and peer-to-peer form of money, all transactions must be necessarily intermediated by financial institutions. Intermediated transactions are by their nature subject to surveillance and control. If third-party financial institutions must be part of all transactions, then they will be privy into the intimate details of everyone's financial life. They can also choose to disallow certain transactions and potentially even certain persons from transacting. Intermediation has many benefits, including efficiency and convenience. Used responsibly, the information gleaned from the privileged position of financial intermediary can also allow one to better extend credit, prevent fraud, and help the authorities to fight crime. But it can also be abused spectacularly by corporations and governments. So if there's no way to avoid intermediation, then individuals will have no way to preserve their privacy or their autonomy. And so in the blockchain context, there's no intermediary in the traditional sense of having a corporation here sitting in between everything, but there is this public ledger that sort of acts as this thing that takes away the privacy and sort of and can expose you to the same problems. So if I look at sort of the Ethereum ecosystem, and this is very early, we're sort of all still at the beginning, where we think that this can grow 1,000 times in every direction, in size everywhere. So privacy is maybe not like the most important. So looking at this graph of not important, important, and burning, and not so burning, well, like selling cats, CryptoKitties is maybe not important, but it's fun, so it happens already today. The value of ETH is something that's greatly discussed, but it's actually also not really important to what we do within reason. Like safer smart contracts, definitely super important. We need to figure this out. It's a hard problem, and it's something that we need to address soon, right? Scalability is high up there, both on the importance and the urgency. Like we need to act on this. We need to be solve it, because otherwise, if people can't sell their cats and buy conference tickets or whatever at the same time, we're gonna have problems, right? But I think, and this is unfortunately at the bottom right, and that's why I'm talking about this, because it is a very important. Privacy is a very important topic, but unfortunately not something that's burning. It doesn't cause us a lot of pain until it's already too late. We've all been using Facebook very happily until Cambridge Analytics and everyone had this wake-up call, right? This unfortunately tends to happen with this topic. So nevertheless, it's something that is important, and we should talk about this. So just in a few minutes, very briefly, I want to talk about what we do at Centrifuge, and sort of as a way to give you ideas how you can actually address this stuff already. I mentioned that we use libp2p and Ethereum, and this is for a few reasons, right? There's actually two main reasons. There's scalability and privacy. We use Ethereum to store sort of our identities. Like these are public keys that are being used. We use it for interacting with on-chain, like with standards like NFTs, ERC20s, etc. And we use it for these like commitments, like we call these anchors. So Ethereum gives us this public global consensus. Like it's extremely secure, but it's slow and costly and public. So libp2p we use for sort of doing transacting most of the stuff, meaning all of the actual data that we send back and forth, we exchange on libp2p in a network that is fully private, and you only communicate directly with the counterparty that you find using an on-chain identity. So I mentioned, blockchain consensus is extremely secure because I have everyone in the network validating it. It also means you pay for everyone validating it, and you have everyone validating your transaction, therefore also reading your transaction. So the model that we have is we're saying it's more of a state channel. So you stop using the blockchain for validating every transaction. You only use it to settle disputes, right? Alice and Bob can transact in private without everyone being privy to it. Only if they can't agree, they will actually go on chain. And because you have this on-chain arbitration, it's very likely that they will ever disagree because they know they can always go on-chain to actually settle that dispute. I'll skip over this. Right, so I want to talk a little bit about Merkle trees. Everyone knows them, right? They're used all over. One of the greatest things allows us to do things like actually building a blockchain. We use them actually for something that's a little bit more than just making sure that a transaction is in a certain block or I don't know, you're a member of a certain group of people or whatever. If you look, let's see, sorry. If you look at this tree, you have the leaves and you have the root hash. I talk about, and in this example, right, centrifuge is dealing with invoices and purchase orders. So in this example, I'm using an invoice. Actually, what we do is we take the invoice, we take each individual field, we encode this in a leaf, which gives us the ability to actually use a Merkle proof to then say that I have an invoice with Merkle root X and the amount is actually $1,500 without telling you who the supplier is or where it's going to be shipped to or what the due date is. Right? So this allows us to deal with large parts of data off-chain, give you sort of control over what kind of statements you want to make about this data on-chain, and how you're sort of going to interact with it. It's also great for scaling things, right? Because in thinking of an invoice, it can be potentially like 10 kilobytes in size, hundreds of fields. You rarely need to talk about everything at the same time, so you can actually use Merkle proofs for sort of showing what you're doing. We published this, we call this library precise proofs. This is actually just does this encoding. We allow you to take protobuf messages, which is a schema that Google came up with, and sort of encode that in a tree. I encourage you to check it out, take a look at it, and sort of like maybe use it, find some ways to do cool stuff with it. What we actually do with these Merkle roots is we commit to the root on chain, so that allows actually for any document that is sort of transacted off chain to later on make statements about it and sort of validate by a smart contract what you. Excuse me. How much time do we have to have left? Is that? Okay. 15 minutes. Okay. Oh, good. Yeah, so it allows you to, so with committing to this root on chain, that we then can interact with other smart contracts, you can make statements about these documents that can be validated, right? So with all this privacy, or sort of with this need for privacy, you have to start thinking about building bridges, because now you've moved all this information off chain. There's no way that a smart contract can just read the value from your contract or can interact with it directly. So what we end up doing is we end up building bridges. And one of those bridges that we build, and so for Centrifuge, like one of a big use case is, as a business, I have invoices. I invoice my customers. They're going to pay me in 60 days, maybe even 90 days, 120 days. But I need to pay my employees now. I need to like pay the suppliers that are giving me the stuff that I need. So I need this cash immediately. This is in the traditional world. This is called factoring. You go to a bank. You tell them I have this invoice. I'm going to get paid in 60 days. Are you willing to give me the money now? And I'll give it. I'll pay you back whenever my customer pays. Of course, for a small fee. And we want to allow our users to do invoice financing, factoring, without a counterparty, without having to go to this bank, right? And we want them to be able to make, to do this by saying, hey, I have this transaction I have this invoice that I sent to my counterparty. They've countersigned it, right? This is the Merkle root that exists on chain, right? So this anchor registry that has this the root hash of the document that is this invoice. So what we can do is we can actually enable you to mint an NFT. So we have this NFT registry. This NFT registry basically says, if you can provide to me a proof that you are the supplier of a valid document, meaning you tell me how much the amount on the invoice is, you tell me that you should prove to me that you are the supplier, meaning that the signature on the document that your user is on the document, that you and your buyer both signed it, etc. Like you provide all of these Merkle proofs. I don't need to know anything about what the goods are that you sold, where you shipped them to, what the prices were of the individual items. I just care about the total amount. Then this contract is going to issue an NFT with this metadata attached. So now you have an NFT that says there exists an invoice off-chain somewhere that has an amount of $1,500 and is due in 60 days. And now you can take this NFT. You've revealed a little bit about it, meaning how much and the date, but you have maybe not revealed anything else. And now you can go to something like Dharma or MakerDAO and use that as collateral and to interact with this DeFi ecosystem. Another like use case that we're thinking of, like if you think of a hypothetical insurance company that is actually a smart contract, I could say I want to ensure that the delivery, that my delivery is actually, I want to ensure that the safe delivery of my goods. I go to this insurance contract and I say, please make, I'm going to pay you a fee. Please ensure that my goods will be delivered. If the shipment gets lost, then I can claim this money. Well, today I would send a copy of the invoice and say, okay, like I'm delivering 1,000 shares. They're going to be shipped to Brazil via container, and I need insurance for this, right? And then the insurance broker is going to give me a quote. He's going to have all of the information, and now the broker has all these details, gets paid, and will insure you. You could do the same thing actually. This insurance broker has just they have a very simple maybe table, right? Like there's a factor by country. There's like depending on the goods, depending on how it's shipped, you come up with some sort of number, and in the end you say, okay, insurance cost is 1% of the goods sold. If it goes to let's say the US instead of Brazil, it's maybe like 0.75%. So you could actually build a zero knowledge proof that proves that that the supplier themselves have calculated the correct insurance amount based on the private information in the invoice. So you give these Merkle proofs to a snark instead of actually posting them on chain. You prove this snark. Maybe very quickly, zero knowledge proofs. If you haven't heard about them, this is basically a way to prove a certain statement without revealing anything about these statements. So think of it as I give you a challenge. If you can solve it, you've proven to me or to anyone else that can verify it that that you know the secret input to sort of get to the result of this puzzle, but I don't get anything about the secret input. So I don't find out anything about what you've used to sort of create this proof. So we can, as an insurance company, I can create this snark, and that sort of has this logic of how much I need to get paid to properly insure a shipment. I can let the supplier I can let the supplier calculate the proof with the private information, so the delivery country, the volume of the goods, how it's shipped, etc. And then that supplier, basically the snark now has a public output. It says, okay, like based on this private information, the insurance should be 2%, and then the supplier attaches the 2% payment. And pays the insurance contract, and now that insurance contract can actually say, yes, this is insured, because I know that I'm getting paid the right amount of money, but I have no idea what I'm actually insuring. And in the end, everyone's going to be happy because the broker knows they're getting paid fairly, or this contract. And as a supplier, I don't have to be worried about the copy of my invoice ending up in the hands of my competitor, because the insurance broker is corrupt and is handing this information to my competition. Those are just two examples. There's many ways that if you start thinking of moving data off chain, that you'll have to think of how you interact with this stuff. Standards like NFTs, just digital signatures. There's a lot you can do here. Those two examples, I hope, show like some of the potential. And with that, I want to conclude my presentation. Just to summarize, you always have this on-chain, off-chain trade-off, or sort of private-public trade-off. Scalability, but actually with that trade-off, you have the same trade-off as scalability. So everything you can move off-chain makes your app scale better, and if you do it the right way, it can also make it more private. So this goes well together. You don't always need global consensus, right? As a buyer and a supplier, if the two of us agree on something, that's usually enough. So I don't need all of Ethereum full nodes to agree on the fact that our invoice is done the way we want it to be. And by showing like some of these things that we're doing, I want to say like it's not on the top of our heads, but actually the technology is here already to sort of do this, to build a privacy-focused product. Well, I'd say mostly, but I think it's something to get into. So yeah, think about it from day one. I think like if you can make ways that your protocol keeps things private in the beginning, it's going to be much easier than trying to tack this on later on. So like when you're designing stuff, you can always make compromises. You can always go on chain more often than you have to. You can always reveal more than you have to because you don't have a way to do it easily right now. But if you sort of keep this in the back of your head, I think it generally puts you in the good spot. All right, thank you very much. If you have any questions, let me know.
One. Okay. Thank you for an amazing talk and for bringing up this topic. I'm totally with you on the importance of privacy. I actually work also on zero-knowledge proof scaling and privacy solution with snarks. My question is, what do you think about the market demand? Because my impression is that you mentioned some examples, but most people are they absolutely don't care. They just say, banks will be fine. Like they're not going to disclose my information. Or Facebook, yeah, there was this noise about the privacy concerns, but then everybody just stayed, and Facebook just reframed it now with, we're going to care for privacy, and everybody's, okay, super. So if there is no demand, it's going to be very difficult for us to defend privacy because it's much easier to build a solution where the operators see the data, as opposed to a completely dark privacy where you completely retain the control. So what do you think we can do as a community who care about this to increase the demand, to increase the awareness and to make people actually want this and to be willing to pay extra?
So I agree. It is very hard to pitch people on privacy, as it's always something that comes last or after privacy has been exposed, and then there's a little bit of an outcry, and people go back to the way they've been doing things. Increasing demand is really hard. Like, go after those. Like, there are users that want it. I think to scale, we will start having to build it. For Centrifuge itself, it's kind of a different case because companies definitely have a different behavior than individuals. Just because, I mean, if you think of a company's accounting data, that's like some of the most private data that they have. It's big corporates are even hesitant to even host this like on cloud hosting. We oftentimes have like their own infrastructure just for their financial data. So for us, this is something that, luckily, I think if we didn't offer privacy, we couldn't sell our product as well. So it's not a choice that I have, and I'm happy that I don't have to make this choice. Personally, of course, I also want to. I care about my own privacy, and it's a topic I care about, irregardless of Centrifuge. So for the broader, like for other use cases, I mean, increasing demand is going to be hard. I think focusing on showing that it is possible to do that, educating users how they can take control of the data, I think is going to help. I think actually this German right to be forgotten is great. That you can ask for your information to be erased, and so the policy that is going in this direction actually, I think, can work, because it's hard to. Privacy is not something that you're getting an immediate benefit from on an individual level, right? Like if I buy an ice cream today, I'm not gonna get a better ice cream or get it more cheaply if I do it with a privacy-enabled product. So like the ice cream that I care about of getting right now, I kind of like privacy is not going to help me help you sell a better ice cream, right? Or make that ice cream better. But so politics, I think, is good. And like making awareness there. Other than that, like just build a product that works and is private and show people that it can be used and it can be good. But I would be curious what others actually have to say if someone has a good idea. We need to increase demand. I think this is the best way to make some of this stuff work. So, yeah.
Nft Registry. Could you? I expect that the NFT already contains a hash of the invoice, and then you have this body of Anchor which contains the private data. Could you explain it a little bit better? What's the goal of this anchor and how the privacy is solved there? And who has the access to that anchor? How it's used?
So the anchor is a Merkle root that you create no matter whether you're trying to to mint an NFT later on or not. So like imagine you send an invoice, you commit to these 32 bytes on chain, and like 5 days later you decide, okay, now I want to finance this invoice. You would actually, it sort of acts as a timestamp and as a general, like just sort of, this is a root hash that can be used by anything else that wants to verify Merkle proofs, right? So the Nft registry doesn't contain the hash, it just asks for a hash of an anchor. So that allows you basically to sort of know the precise time. It allows for minting of different NFTs. So if you think of like this payment obligations for getting paid on an invoice early is just one thing where you might want to do different things. So this is what sort of how we've abstracted it.
Who can ask the anchor for revealing the data?
Well, so the anchor is just a commitment on chain. The
Merkle root proof.
So the Merkle root, yeah. The private data is shared just among the participants of this transaction. So like in this example, the buyer and the supplier. And they will not give the data to anyone else unless they're unless someone else can show I have a valid reason to request this data, in which case they would. We're not solving data availability issues. I don't want to get into that because I'm sure this is like one of the first topics that will come up. But so the privacy there is preserved on just like keeping this data off chain. If you like in this NFT example, I said the privacy you get is it's not full privacy because of course you're still disclosing the amount. But today you need to do this to go into Maker and actually put your invoice into a CDP. So we can't get around this. But for example, if you had, if you wanted to create an NFT registry where you have some sort of credit rating, you have a table with credit scores of different buyers, you could create an NFT registry where you supply a zero knowledge proof that the buyer on this invoice is actually with a certain credit rating, but you don't have to disclose who it is. And then you have this NFT that just has a credit rating that is verified with a snark and an amount, but you're not disclosing who your customer is, right? So this is like how you can get, and there's different ways, sort of different levels that you can do. The goal is just making it, allowing you to sort of choose what you want to disclose at what point in time. And you can do like all of this stuff completely off chain and not interacting with any like Ethereum dApps with NFTs or whatever, and then like you have your privacy, and then the anchor just acts as this immutable timestamp. Anyone else? Questions? Thank you.